Hi everyone, my name is Tiffany Zhang and I'm the founder and host of Undocumented History and online YouTube video podcast. Welcome to episode 20. The Asian American Foundation is one of the most well-known foundations and nonprofits supporting AAPIs. This foundation was founded in response to the Asian hate during the pandemic and has spearheaded multiple initiatives to support AAPIs, including creating a roadmap to standardize AAPI history and U.S. school curriculum, and partnering with GoFundMe to establish an emergency fund for AAPIs affected by hate crimes. In this episode, Ms. Bay and I will discuss what's next for the Asian American Foundation, what it takes to have an Asian American president, and this bamboo ceiling for Asian American women. Here is my conversation with her. Hi everyone, and welcome to Undocumented History, an online video podcast focused on educating others about Asian culture and history, while also amplifying Asian voices and stories. I'm Tiffany Zhang, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Prisca Bay. Ms. Bay is the Chief Partnership Officer for the Asian American Foundation, otherwise known as TAAF, and a former executive at PepsiCo, where she oversaw their gender diversity and women's strategy. Ms. Bay, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to join me. Before we start, is there anything else that you want to add regarding to what you do and who you are?
No, that was perfect. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I guess my first kind of question to kind of establish some background information would be based around your experiences as an Asian American woman. So I know that many of your initiatives, such as working with the Asian American Foundation and Pepsi, have been around empowering girls, women, and the Asian American community. What was your experience like growing up as an Asian American woman, and what kind of motivated you to do these initiatives that empowered these specific communities?
Thank you for that question. It's really so wonderful to see you doing a online podcast like this. It's actually quite inspiring for me. When I was growing up, I'm Korean American, first of all, and I was born in Korea, and I grew up in Chicago. And my parents were, you know, just really hardworking Asian Americans, as many of our parents are, and they didn't speak very much English and they did not go to college. And so when I saw them growing up working so hard, I think I did the thing a lot of immigrant kids do. You just wanted to make life better for your mom and dad when you grew up. I think that was sort of my goal. And I did that as early as I could. I think that so many of us have this common story of being our family's translators, right? We're the ones who read the mail. We're the ones who translate between the teachers and our parents. And I think from a very young age, I just felt the need to, I don't know, represent my community, represent my family, and protect everyone. So I thought, maybe one day I'll go to law school, which, I ultimately did. And I think that as an Asian woman, you sort of also see the ways in which life feels unfair for whatever reason. And I think that from a very young age, I always felt that I wanted to remedy that. And as I grew up and I went to college, I was a women's studies major. I really was very interested in thinking about gender inequality and what could I do to fix that, and how can I be a part of making our world a little bit more just for my communities. And so I think that, ultimately the work that I do and the work that you might see on my resume and my LinkedIn reflects a lot of my personal passions. I never thought that I would actually be paid to do work for women. And so when I, first told my brother, this funny story, I told my brother that I was going to be a women's studies major, and he told me no one would ever hire me. And so years later, being able to do gender diversity work at a company like PepsiCo, and then now being able to focus on the Asian American part of my identity is just a professional journey that I never thought I would ever embark on. But the reasons why I do this work is because from a very young age, I was just very passionate about, how to make the world more inclusive for all of us. And so it's just been a real fun ride so far.
hmm And then kind of going, or first of all, it was great to hear about your experiences, but kind of going on some kind of the work you've done and the initiatives you've done. So I know you raised over $1.1 billion for the AAPI Giving Challenge from companies and foundations. How do you kind of mobilize, I guess mobilize these institutions to support and care about Asian American affairs? And how do you kind of go about these campaigns?
I mean, first of all, that question is fantastic, because I think that question of how do you get people to care about these issues is the reason why we mobilize them in the first place. And I'll start back to when I was, doing sort of what we call social impact work from the private sector. So, I don't know if you know, but like in many companies, there are people at those companies who are, their day-to-day jobs is to think about how to make the world a better place, right? And how can that company be a part of that? So, depending on the company that you work in, the initiatives might be to focus on children or education or women. And at PepsiCo, our focus, my role was to focus on women. And I remember, in all of these great jobs that I've had, whether it's at PepsiCo or Goldman Sachs and, other places, I guess when I got to the Asian American Foundation, the story that I would share internally was that, I had all these great jobs and I worked on these diverse initiatives, but I always felt that, we weren't doing enough for Asian Americans at any of these places that I worked. And I wondered how we could fix that, at the Asian American Foundation. There is a role for TAAF to play. That could be one. And it's, we launched TAAF at a time when there was heightened sort of hate and discrimination against Asian Americans. And I think that the world, or at least the American public, they were made to feel more aware and more sensitive to these issues. So I think it was just sort of at that moment in time, a lot of people were looking around and thinking like, what can I do? How can I learn? And so when TAAF launched, like what we did was we said, hey, company XYZ, like, why don't you join us in supporting the Asian American community? All you have to do is commit to supporting the community. You have to tell us what you're going to do and how much you're going to spend in that community over 5 years. We'll add it all up and then together we will announce it. And so I think just in that moment in time, it was a time when companies needed to do something, wanted to do something. And we just became a partner that asked them to really raise their hand and commit to supporting the Asian American community. So in 6 weeks, we were able to mobilize over 60 companies, dozens of families and some foundations to commit to supporting the Asian American community. And when you add up all of their support over 5 years, it was over $1 billion. And I think the most important piece of that campaign was that I think very few people are asking companies and other institutions, like, what are you doing for the Asian American community? I don't think people get that question. And so when someone is asking, the fact that the mere fact of asking, right, makes them think like, oh, we could probably do more. So I think that was the most important part of what we call the AAPI Giving Challenge. That was the initiative that raised over $1 billion in pledges for the community. And I also want to clarify that, that money didn't come to TAAF. That money, mostly 80% of it went directly into the community. And what TAAF is doing every single year is we go back to each of those partners and we ask them, hey, how did it go? What did you do? And what are you continuing to do? And so I think that way, there's always going to be sort of outside pressure and agitation and partnership in helping organizations do the right thing by supporting the Asian American community.
That's so great to hear, and I'm glad that TAF didn't do kind of just like a one-time thing, like they kept adding pressure like yearly and like checking in. And I guess like kind of speaking about money and like having economic influence, I know TAF, like as stated on the TAF website, like one of their missions I think is they want to close the vast API economic and influence gap. I guess like how is TAF helping API communities in the influence game? Or like in other words, like how is TAF empowering and galvanizing the political presence of API communities? Because I feel like politics is a way for like the API community to have more influence.
I think that, and I'm curious what your answer to this might be. For me personally, there came a time maybe about 5 or so years ago where my Asian American friends and I sort of looked at each other and said, like, shouldn't we should be doing more. Like we should be doing more to help each other. Because I think that at that time in my career, I was doing a lot of women's work. I was going to a lot of events supporting women, advancing women and politics and, corporate America and other places. And I think that, there were just not enough things happening for the Asian American community. So, started to get more involved personally. And so when TAF came around, we realized like this was something we could do as an organization. And we're really proud to work with all sectors. So we think about, corporate America, we think about, you know, academia, how many professors are there? How many deans are there? We think about, the nonprofit space. We think about philanthropy, how much money is going to the Asian American community, government, how many Asian American leaders do we have? Hollywood, how many decision makers are in Hollywood, right? Helping ensure that our stories are being told in the most authentic ways possible, and that there are enough people telling, representing us in film and television, journalists. So we think about all of the sectors and how we need to just sort of think about where we are, like, what's the data, like, are we underrepresented anywhere? So we always start with research, and then we think about what can we do to advance, sort of the leadership gaps and strengthen what we call the pipeline of leadership. So, we're doing multiple things. One of the things we're doing is thinking about boards. At every company, every institution, there's always a group of people at the very top helping guide that organization. And we're trying to figure out, like, how many Asian Americans are a part of those leadership roles, right? And trying to increase that number. We're thinking about what we call the C-suite, which is like at a company or an organization, like sort of the leaders at the top. And, looking at that C-suite and thinking how many Asian Americans are actually there and how can we get more Asian Americans there? So professional development, mentoring, at some point in your career, right, after you graduate from school, you're going to realize that working hard is not going to get you to the next job. It's going to be all about relationships. It's going to be about something called soft power. It's mentorship. It's something called sponsorship. Other people have to help you and believe in you as well. And I think as Asian Americans, sometimes we don't organize. We just think like, let's just do great work, put our head down. And sometimes it doesn't serve us. And so I think at TAAF, what we're learning is that we have to build networks to support each other as we advance through all the career pathways that we're choosing, whether it's politics or corporate America or philanthropy.
That's so inspiring to hear all the work that TAF has been doing for the Asian American community. And I would just like to know, like, what's like next for TAF? Like, what is TAF's kind of like next steps, I guess?
I think the most exciting thing for me is that, we're only 3 years old. So when you think about a lot of these organizations that serve other communities, they've been around for 100 plus years. And so as a new organization, I think the most important thing for us is to create the strongest foundation. And our team has grown when I started, I think we had like 6 people, 6 full-time staff members. Now we have like 35. So I think for TAF right now, it's to build that strong foundation. We have an incredible team in place to do the work. And so now it's about impact, trying to figure out like, are the strategies that we're putting in place actually going to change the game for us, right? And I think in this work, you don't see results right away. So you have to be patient and you have to work hard. And so I think that for TAF, the next step is, sort of measuring our impact, sharing our stories, and thinking through like, what more could we be doing, and actually executing on the great ideas that our team have come up with in the last 3 years, and just, putting those plans into action.
That's so great to hear. And I kind of just wanted to pivot back to something you said before in the previous question I asked you. You talked about how Asian Americans are more like working hard and like putting their head down. And so I kind of wanted to ask you, like, as a successful like Asian American woman, like what would your advice be to other Asian American, I guess, women who want to kind of like surpass the bamboo ceiling? And why do you kind of think that bamboo ceiling exists?
There's a research report out there that says that Asian Americans are the least likely to be promoted into management of all racial groups. And when I first read that, I mean, I personally was shocked. I guess I wasn't surprised, but I was definitely, very reflective of why that could be. And, I don't want to paint us all as one kind of community, right? Like we're so diverse within the Asian American umbrella. But I do think that there is something about the way that maybe we were raised, and like the ways that which my parents told me, just, don't speak up, just do your work, don't rock the boat. And I'm realizing that maybe, and of course you know, I think they would probably tell you that I didn't listen to them. And so maybe that's one thing that I would encourage people to do, is just always speak up. If you have an idea, an opposing idea in a meeting, always raise your hand, always share your perspective. That is the reason why people pay you to go to work, is so that your perspectives can be shared to make, everything much stronger, everyone's ideas much stronger. So I would always say speak up. I would also encourage people to develop relationships. Develop relationships with people who are more senior to you, who are maybe a few years ahead of you, so that they can sort of guide you, right? And sort of share with you like what they went through and learn from that. But also develop really strong relationships with people your age and maybe people younger than you. I do think that at this this point in time, like we learn so much from each other. It doesn't matter if you're older or younger. There's so much more that you can learn. And what you'll find is those relationships that you have will carry you through your career. So me, I graduated college a long time ago. And the people that I was friends with in college and law school, they're the people that I rely on now. So you think that right now, oh, this person's just my friend, but you don't realize that in 10 or 15 years, it could actually be a really important sounding board for the job that you might want, for the career shift that you might want to take. And so I would just say, like, everyone is important, every relationship is important, just maintain those relationships.
Of course, and I also think like not just I mean I know you touched on this, but also not just like friending people older than you. I also think it's important to friend people younger than you because it's kind of like a cycle of like giving back and stuff.
For sure. I love to mentor so much. I learned so much. And I also know that, I'm going to learn so much from these people I mentor, and they're probably going to be my boss in a few years. So, I think that, it doesn't matter how senior people are, or how junior people are, everyone has value.
And I kind of, going back to the question I asked you, I kind of wanted to ask you because I feel like I had kind of the same realization as you because I was watching, or I don't know, somewhere it said that like Asian CEOs at US companies were like, it was like a very few percentage. And I think it kind of just like made me reflect on like, I guess like Asian Americans in kind of like leadership positions. So I'm glad that we got to have a conversation about that.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I would encourage you and maybe other women, Asian Americans, if people ask you, like, hey, do you want to be the CEO of a company? You should always say yes. Why not? Right. Because I think that if you ask a lot of your friends that question, especially women, a lot of them will say no. And then you have to wonder, like, why there aren't as many of us in those roles as possible. I think that we all just need to go for it, and we all need to want to be the CEO. And so I guess, the piece of advice that I would give, people like you and your age is just always be as ambitious as you want to be.
Of course. And then I kind of wanted to kind of end on a more broad, like fun theoretical question. I guess like what do you think it'll take or like how, I don't know, like what do you think it'll take to have an Asian American president?
Oh my God, that's a really wonderful question. Um, I don't know the answer to that. I ask myself all the time, what will it take for us to have a woman president? We almost had one a few years ago. I think it will take all of us to truly want it, to truly believe that it's important, number one. So I think that even in instances where we get close, some people kind of decide, like, oh, it doesn't matter what their gender is or what their race is. Like, we just want the best person for the job, which is I think if you're auditioning for that job, you're probably pretty good, right? I mean, hopefully that's the hope. I think for us, it will depend on that very special candidate. Right. So I think that what we should do right now is look around and see who might be able to run for president in the next, cycle or two. And so this could be someone your age, this could be someone my age, and start supporting them. You have to support Asian American candidates, regardless of how big their offices are. We just need many more Asian Americans to be running for all the things so that we will have candidates who can be president one day. And so I am thinking about someone like Andy Kim. He is running for Senate in New Jersey. He could be president, right? He should be president. And so I think that what we all need to do is start supporting people like him or people who are running for local offices. We just need many more Andy Kims out there. We have Michelle Wu in Boston, the mayor of Boston. She's amazing. She may run for president one day too. So I do think that what we should do is think about who are the people, who are local leaders, and think about how we can start supporting them now so that one day they can run for president and be president.
I agree. I think it's a very hard question to answer, but I think it definitely does take like supporting each other. And I definitely do think it is possible, I would say, like especially with like Gen Z. I feel like Gen Z is kind of the generation of change and also just like the increasing number of Asian American members in government. I feel like it definitely is possible, but I think it, as you said, like it depends on supporting each other and also being like finding that special candidate.
Right, right. And we have many special candidates, so we just have to support them.
So, thank you so much, Miss Bay, for coming on and speaking with me. It was so great talking to you and listening to all the things that you had to say. And I guess, is there any last words that you wanted to say, or any like socials you wanted to plug?
Nothing. I just wanted to congratulate you on this incredible interview. I really enjoyed it. And I hope one day that you will run for office. It seems like maybe that is something you might be interested in doing. So I encourage you to do so.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will see everyone next time. Bye.
Thank you.